So as I begin my words tonight, just like to make a quick note that I'm still working on getting my voice back, which left me about 3 weeks ago. So I apologize if I cough or if I stumble a little bit. I promise it will be back by the High Holy Days, unless it is not. I have distinct memories of when Facebook started to become ubiquitous. A little history first. Facebook's history began in 2004 as a social networking service for Harvard students, created by Mark Zuckerberg and his college roommates, which was depicted in the movie The Social Network, starring Jesse Eisenberg, which came out in 2010. Initially called the Facebook.com, the social media site expanded to other universities and eventually became accessible to anyone over 13 with a valid email address. I remember being a relatively early adopter while I was serving as the assistant rabbi in Tucson, Arizona, probably around 2005 or 2006. From the beginning, I was hooked. As a somewhat isolated assistant rabbi, I found it a great way to connect with friends, colleagues, family members, and eventually with people from my past. Initially, it was a great way to share life updates, pictures, and even post the announcements regarding the births of our first 2 children. But I kept coming back to it because it was just a great way to get updates and to have fun. But as we all know, at some point it began to change. As Facebook began mining our information, they were looking for algorithms to keep us ever engaged on the site. It did not do them any good if we just hopped on for a few minutes and then hopped off. That was no way to build advertising revenue. What they needed was a way to keep people engaged. And sadly, what in so many other sites have found is that surprise and anger is the most effective means of engagement. But more on this in a moment. This week we'll be reading from Parashat Pinchas. What we find at the end of last week's Torah portion is a deeply troubling story. It involves an Israelite man behaving in an explicit way with a Midianite woman in front of the tent of meeting. Outraged, Pinchas, often translated as Phineas, took a spear in his hand and, for lack of a better word, impaled the couple. This week's parasha picks up with the rest of the story by telling us God spoke to Moses saying, Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned my wrath from the Israelites by displaying among them his passion for me, so that I did not wipe out the Israelite people in my passion. Say, therefore, I will grant him my pact of friendship, shalom. It shall be for him and his descendants after him a pact of priesthood for all time, because he took impassioned action for his God, thus making expiation for the Israelites. There is so much to dive into here, including the opportunities and dangers of religious zealotry. But that is a conversation for another day, specifically this Sunday at Countryside, where I'll be preaching about it. Instead, tonight I wanted to focus on this pact of shalom. As noted in the Eitz Chaim, several commentators understood God's granting the priesthood to Pinchas and his descendants not as a reward for its extremism, but as an antidote for it. He will have to cure himself of his violent temper if he is to function as a Kohen, according to the Ketav Sofer. This will protect Pinchas from the destructive impulse within him, according to Ha'amek Davar. Perhaps serving as a Kohen will give him a way of atoning for having taken 2 lives. A person is never the same after he has shed blood, no matter how justifiable the cause. One way to look at this episode is that the Torah likes to give extreme examples, especially when it comes to problem solving. But another way to think about it is that peace rarely comes through anger, or that calm rarely is a result of righteous indignation. I was thinking about that because of how often we are tempted when we are outraged to post a missive on a social media site. We get our anger, our hurt, our frustration out into the world. And truth be told, do we then feel better? More often than not, the answer simply is no. What happens is typically one of two things. Either some validate how we are feeling, but others will immediately respond with more inflammatory comments, thus only escalating whatever the issue or issues are that we are trying to address. I have mentioned before that social media is a very poor place for dialogue and exchange of ideas. All too often it becomes a bubble by which we only see and hear like-minded ideas, or we only see and hear ideas and people placed in our path to outrage us. And then we are all too often tempted to respond like Pinchas with more righteous anger. This is probably in part why so many researchers can trace negative emotions to social media like anxiety, depression, and loneliness. In looking around, especially given the state of the world today, we have to be very cautious in how we let social media impact us. According to at least one university study, they recommend we be mindful of our social media habits, including asking ourselves, what is your pattern of social media use? For example, do you wake up and immediately start scrolling? Do you scroll during breaks, before bed, etc.? How much time do you spend daily on social media? How do you use social media? Do you use it to see what other people are doing? Or do you use it to communicate and stay connected with others? Do you tend to feel better or worse when utilizing media? Does it lower your self-esteem, cause you to feel depressed? Or do you feel better after being on social media? To counter this, they recommend setting limits to the amount of time we spend on social media, which includes knowing when it is time to stop scrolling. This is hard to do as it is such an impulsive activity. Why do you think they make apps so easy to use and so addictive? Another recommendation is to use social media to connect with people who inspire you, share similar interests, and provide a sense of belonging. And lastly, to stop following those who continue to stir up negative emotions. For myself, I unsubscribed from Twitter or whatever the heck it is called ages ago. I'm also now almost never on Facebook, and I even stopped watching TikTok. It is all too much. I have found it takes me away from my family, from my community, which is ironic because that's why I got onto Facebook initially. But more than that, social media can also give us the false sense that we are actually accomplishing something. All too often you post or repost something about an area of concern and then move on with your lives. There's even a term for this, slacktivism, which the United Nations defines as when people support a cause by performing simple measures, but are not necessarily engaged or devoted to making a change. Other frequently used terms are clicktivism or armchair activism. This is not to diminish social media as a form of information, though even then, be leery of 1-minute summaries of complex issues. Instead, I would like to offer an alternative. And that alternative is the Jewish approach. The Jewish approach involves immersing oneself in a topic or topics like we do in Torah study. It means wrestling with contradictory opinions and arguing with others, but not arguing for the sake of winning. Instead, arguing machloket l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, for greater understanding. In a way, Pinchas is like how we should treat social media, or how we treat social media. We get angry, we react. Rarely do we see the results we are looking for, and instead we are often left feeling more empty than we did before. This is all a roundabout a way of saying that social media is not quite the tool we think it is. And because of this, we should be much more cautious about how we use it and how we engage with it. Better to limit our time on it so we can engage genuinely, respectfully, and curiously with others through deep and meaningful connections. And if we do this, we might just be able to be blessed with the promise ultimately granted to Pinchas and his descendants, the Brit Shalom, the covenant of friendship, the covenant of peace. Shabbat Shalom.